For 800,000 years, the galaxy had known only war. The conflict began when the Vorthak Empire first encountered the Zalani Federation near the rim worlds of Sector 7. What started as a territorial dispute over mining rights had escalated into a cosmic holocaust that consumed entire star systems. Generation after generation, both civilizations poured their resources into increasingly devastating weapons. Planets were cracked open like eggs, stars were artificially collapsed into black holes, and entire species were driven to extinction in the crossfire. The war had become so fundamental to both societies that neither could remember what peace looked like. The Vorthak, with their crystalline exoskeletons and hive-mind mentality, built ships the size of moons. Their Devastator-class vessels could strip mine entire worlds in hours, converting raw matter into more weapons of war. The Zalani, ethereal beings of pure energy, crafted reality-warping dreadnoughts that could phase through dimensions and strike from impossible angles. Humanity had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel when they stumbled into this ancient conflict. Earth's first exploratory vessel, the Pioneer, had emerged from hyperspace directly between two massive fleets locked in battle near the Centauri system. Within minutes, both sides had targeted the small human ship as a potential threat or ally. Captain James Morrison had made a split-second decision that would define humanity's role in the galactic war. Instead of fleeing or choosing sides, he broadcast on all frequencies, "This is Captain Morrison of the human vessel Pioneer. We're explorers, not warriors. But if you want to fight, you'll have to go through us first." That act of desperate bravado had somehow impressed both ancient civilizations. The Vorthak saw potential warriors in humanity's defiance. The Zalani detected something they called chaotic creativity in human thought patterns. Within a solar year, humanity had been drawn into the conflict as reluctant participants, their worlds serving as neutral zones and their ships as mediators when temporary ceasefires needed to be arranged. But mediation was a luxury neither side could afford for long. The war resumed with renewed fury, and humanity found itself caught between two cosmic powers that viewed the universe as nothing more than a battlefield. Human colonies became staging grounds, human resources were conscripted for the war effort, and human children grew up knowing only the distant thunder of starship battles lighting up the night sky. The Terran Defense Force grew from a handful of explorer vessels to a modest fleet of medium-class warships. They weren't as powerful as Vorthak Devastators or as advanced as Zalani reality benders, but they were stubborn, adaptable, and surprisingly difficult to kill. More importantly, they had something both ancient races had lost over the millennia: the ability to think outside the parameters of total war. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the TDF Persistence, watching through the viewports as newer, more powerful ships took their positions in the battle formation. Her vessel, along with the rest of the 7th Fleet's older ships, had been relegated to rear guard duty, essentially a polite way of saying they were too outdated to be useful in the front lines. The Persistence was a Ranger-class vessel, built 50 years ago when humanity was still learning the basics of galactic warfare. Its armor was composite steel and ceramic rather than the quantum-forged materials used in newer ships. Its weapons were conventional plasma cannons and missile tubes, not the reality-disrupting armaments that had become standard. Its computer systems still used physical interfaces and manual overrides, primitive by current standards. Commander, called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, Admiral Blackwood is requesting final status reports from all vessels. Elena sighed as she looked around her small bridge crew. 23 people kept this ship running, compared to the skeletal crews of 5 or 6 that operated the new automated vessels. But those 23 people had been together for over a decade. They knew every quirk of their ancient ship, every sound that meant trouble, every shortcut that could save precious seconds in combat. "Tell the Admiral that the Persistence and her crew are ready for whatever comes," Elena replied. Through the comm channel, she could hear similar reports from the other obsolete ships in their formation, the Endeavour, the Resilience, the Defiance, and dozens of others that the war planners had written off as relics. The current battle was expected to be decisive. Intelligence suggested that the Vorthak were preparing to unveil a new superweapon, something called the reality anchor, that could supposedly lock entire star systems into a single-dimensional phase, making them vulnerable to conventional attack. The Zilani response had been to gather their most powerful reality warpers for a coordinated strike that would either destroy the weapon or tear a hole in spacetime trying. Both fleets had assembled in the neutral zone around the dead system of Kepler 442. Once, it had been home to a thriving world, but that planet had been shattered 300,000 years ago in one of the war's early campaigns. Now it served as a graveyard monument to the futility of the conflict. Sensor contact, reported Ensign Park from the science station. Multiple hyperspace exits detected. Vorthak fleet is arriving. The enemy ships materialized out of folded space like crystalline mountains, their surfaces gleaming with integrated weapon systems. At the center of their formation sat something Elena had never seen before, a perfect black sphere the size of a small moon, surrounded by crackling energy fields that seemed to bend light around them. That must be their reality anchor, Torres breathed. Before Elena could respond, space shimmered on the opposite side of the system as the Zilani fleet phase shifted into normal dimensions. Their ships looked more like living organisms than manufactured vessels, all flowing curves and bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with barely contained power. All ships, this is Admiral Blackwood, the fleet commander's voice crackled over the comm, we're going in. Older vessels maintain support positions and provide cover fire as needed. Elena watched as the sleek new ships of the Terran fleet accelerated toward the convergent alien forces. In minutes, the space around the dead system would erupt into the kind of violence that had been tearing the galaxy apart for nearly 1,000,000 years. What none of them could know was that this battle would be different. The first exchange of fire lit up the void like a newborn star. Vorthak crystalline destroyers launched waves of what appeared to be solidified gravity, massive projectiles that warped spacetime as they traveled. The Zilani responded by opening dimensional rifts that swallowed the incoming attacks and spat them back from impossible angles. Admiral Blackwood's main fleet dove into the chaos with weapons blazing. The newest Terran dreadnoughts, the Valor and Victory, unleashed torrents of quantum-disrupted plasma that could theoretically damage either alien technology. Their shields flared as return fire tested the limits of human engineering. From her position in the rear guard, Commander Rodriguez watched the battle unfold with growing unease. Something felt wrong about this engagement. Both alien fleets seemed to be holding back, not committing their full strength to the attack. It was as if they were testing something, waiting for the right moment to reveal their true strategy. Commander, Lieutenant Torres called urgently, I'm detecting massive energy buildup from both fleet centers. Whatever they're planning, it's big. Elena's blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. They're not trying to win this battle, she said. They're using it as cover for something else. Torres, scan for any unusual activity in the outer system. Before her communications officer could comply, space itself seemed to scream. The Vorthak reality anchor activated, sending out waves of dimensional force that locked the local area of space into a single-phase state. Simultaneously, the Zilani unleashed their secret weapon, a massive reality storm that began tearing holes between dimensions. The interaction between the two superweapons created something unprecedented, a cascade failure in the fabric of spacetime itself. Instead of canceling each other out, the reality anchor and the dimensional storm began feeding off each other, growing stronger and more unstable with each passing second. All ships, emergency withdrawal. Admiral Blackwood's voice cut through the comm channels. The dimensional matrix is collapsing. We need to clear the system immediately. But it was already too late for many vessels. The newest ships, with their sophisticated navigation systems and automated jump drives, found their equipment overloaded by the chaotic energy readings. One by one, the pride of the Terran fleet began losing power, their complex systems failing under the strain of trying to process impossible data. The Valor drifted helplessly as her quantum computers crashed. The Victory managed to fire her engines for 30 seconds before her navigation array exploded in a shower of sparks. Throughout the system, ships from all three species found themselves stranded as the spacetime cascade continued to grow. Status report, Elena demanded, gripping her command chair as the Persistence bucked under waves of dimensional distortion. Main power steady, life support green, engines responding normally, Ensign Park reported with barely contained amazement. Commander, all our systems are still operational. Elena stared at her bridge crew in disbelief. Around them, the most advanced warships in the galaxy were being disabled by the chaotic energies unleashing in the system, but their 50-year-old vessel was weathering the storm without difficulty. Then understanding dawned on her. It's our old systems, she realized aloud. The new ships are too sophisticated, they're trying to process and adapt to readings that don't make sense. But our equipment is too simple to get confused. We just keep doing what we were built to do. Throughout the rear guard formation, the obsolete ships of the 7th Fleet found themselves in the unprecedented position of being the only operational vessels in a system full of disabled dreadnoughts. The dimensional cascade was still growing, threatening to tear a permanent hole in reality itself. The space-time cascade had grown beyond anyone's worst projections. What began as a localized dimensional distortion had become a rapidly expanding sphere of chaos that threatened to consume not just the Kepler 442 system, but neighboring star systems as well. At its center, the interaction between the Vorthak reality anchor and the Zalani dimensional storm had created something that defied all known physics, a wound in the universe itself. Commander Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Persistence, surrounded by reports from the other functional ships in her small fleet. Of the 300 vessels that had entered the system, only 37 remained operational, all of them obsolete Ranger-class ships with simple, robust systems that couldn't be confused by impossible sensor readings. Commander, Lieutenant Torres reported, we're receiving transmissions from both alien fleets. They want to coordinate a joint effort to contain the cascade before it spreads beyond the system. Elena couldn't hide her bitter laugh. After 800,000 years of war, it takes the end of the universe to get them to cooperate. Put them through. The main screen flickered to life, split between two very different alien visages. On the left, the multifaceted crystal head of Hive Commander Zexthal of the Vorthak Empire. On the right, the shimmering energy pattern that represented High Sage Luminara of the Zalani Federation. Human Commander, Zexthal's voice buzzed through harmonic resonances in the ship's hull. Our analysis indicates that the cascade cannot be stopped by conventional means. Both our reality anchor and their dimensional storm must be simultaneously deactivated, but our ships cannot approach the epicenter. Luminara's communication came as pure thought transmitted directly into Elena's mind. The chaotic energies are too intense for our phase shift capabilities. Our vessels cannot maintain cohesion in the affected area. Only your primitive ships seem capable of functioning in the distorted space. Elena looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These were career military personnel who had spent their entire adult lives in a war they didn't start, fighting for causes they barely understood. Now, suddenly, they were being asked to save not just their own species, but their enemies as well. What exactly are you asking us to do? She said aloud. Zexthal and Luminara exchanged what might have been meaningful looks, difficult to tell with beings so fundamentally different from humans. The Vorthak commander spoke first. Our respective superweapons are located at the exact center of the cascade. They must be deactivated simultaneously, or the feedback loop will continue. This requires precise coordination and the ability to survive in the chaotic zone long enough to complete the shutdown sequence. We will transmit the deactivation codes to your vessels, Luminara added. But someone must physically reach both weapons and execute the shutdown within a 30-second window. The margin for error is minimal. Elena studied the tactical display showing the growing dimensional cascade. At its heart, barely visible through the distorted space, were the two weapons that had started this catastrophe. The distance between them would require her ships to split up, with half approaching each target simultaneously. Why should we risk our people to clean up your mess? Elena asked bluntly. It was Luminara who answered, her mental voice carrying undertones of something that might have been regret, because if we fail, the cascade will reach inhabited systems within 6 hours. Billions will die, human, Vorthak, and Zalani alike. The war that has consumed us for so long will become irrelevant when there is no galaxy left to fight over. Elena closed the channel and turned to her crew. You heard them. This is completely outside our mission parameters. We're explorers and peacekeepers who got dragged into someone else's war. No one would blame us if we withdrew to a safe distance and let the universe's oldest enemies solve their own problem. She paused, meeting each of their eyes in turn. But that's not who we are. The formation of obsolete ships entered the Cascade Zone in perfect synchronization. Elena had divided her small fleet into two groups. 17 ships led by the Persistence would target the Vorthak reality anchor, while 20 ships under Commander Martinez on the Endeavour would approach the Zalani dimensional storm generator. As they penetrated deeper into the chaotic space, the effects became increasingly severe. Outside the viewports, stars appeared to be in multiple locations simultaneously. The ship's chronometers began displaying impossible readings as time itself became unstable. Most disturbing of all, members of the crew occasionally glimpsed alternate versions of themselves at their stations, echoes from probability streams that should never have intersected. Distance to target, 2 million kilometers and closing, Ensign Park reported, his voice steady despite the fact that his console showed him readings that violated several fundamental laws of physics. The reality anchor is. I'm not sure how to describe it, Commander. It's like looking at a hole in the shape of a sphere. Elena gripped her command chair as another wave of distortion passed through the ship. She could feel the fabric of reality stretching around them like rubber being pulled to its breaking point. On the comm channel, she could hear similar reports from the other group approaching the Zalani weapon. All ships, maintain formation, she broadcast to both groups. Remember, we have one shot at this. Both weapons must be deactivated within 30 seconds of each other, or the cascade will collapse into something even worse. The Vorthak reality anchor grew larger on their screens as they approached, a perfect black sphere that seemed to absorb light, matter, and possibility itself. Around it, the crystalline structure of a Vorthak command ship had been twisted into impossible geometric configurations, its crew long since dead from exposure to unreality. Commander Martinez reports his group is in position at the Zalani target, Torres announced. Dimensional storm generator is active and, he says it looks like a star turned inside out. Elena checked their tactical display one final time. Both groups were as close as they dared approach to their respective targets. Any closer, and even their robust old systems might begin to fail. The deactivation would have to be accomplished using the ship's longest-range communication arrays, broadcasting the shutdown codes directly into the weapon's control systems. All ships, this is Commander Rodriguez, she announced on fleet-wide communications. In 30 seconds, we're going to attempt something that has never been tried before, simultaneous deactivation of two reality-altering weapons while spacetime collapses around us. I won't lie to you, our chances of survival are minimal. She paused, looking around her bridge one final time. These people had become her family over the years, bound together by shared dangers and the peculiar camaraderie that comes from serving on an obsolete ship in an impossible war. But if we succeed, we don't just save billions of lives. We prove that sometimes, the oldest and simplest solutions are the most effective. We prove that humanity's stubborn refusal to give up matters. And maybe, just maybe, we prove that 800,000 years of war can finally come to an end. The countdown began, 10 seconds to simultaneous transmission of the deactivation codes. Elena watched as both groups of ships aligned their communications arrays with surgical precision, their crews working with the kind of calm professionalism that comes from decades of serving together. 5 seconds, Torres announced. All systems ready. Execute, Elena commanded. Both groups transmitted simultaneously, their signals carrying the shutdown codes into the heart of the reality storm. For a moment that lasted either an eternity or an instant, time had little meaning in the collapsing spacetime around Kepler, 442, nothing seemed to happen. The reality anchor continued its dark absorption of possibility while the dimensional storm raged with undiminished fury. Elena held her breath as seconds ticked by on her chronometer, each one potentially marking the failure of their desperate plan. Then, as suddenly as switching off a light, both weapons deactivated. The reality anchor collapsed into a point of nothingness and vanished, taking with it the twisted remains of the Vorthack command ship. The dimensional storm folded in on itself like a flower closing for the night, leaving behind only the fading afterglow of wounded spacetime slowly healing. Throughout the system, the effects were immediate and dramatic. Disabled ships began reporting power restoration as their sophisticated systems came back online, no longer overwhelmed by impossible readings. The cascade effect that had threatened neighboring star systems dissipated like morning mist, leaving behind only the normal void between stars. All ships report successful deactivation, Lieutenant Torres announced, his voice barely controlled. The cascade has stopped. Commander Martinez's group is intact and reporting minimal damage. Elena slumped back in her command chair, suddenly aware of how tense she had been. Around her, the bridge crew began to relax for the first time in hours. But their celebration was interrupted by an incoming transmission request, from both alien fleets simultaneously. The main screen once again split to show Hive Commander Zex Thul and High Sage Luminara. For several seconds, none of the three commanders spoke. 800,000 years of warfare had just been brought to a sudden, unexpected halt, and no one seemed quite sure what came next. Finally, Zex Thul's harmonic voice broke the silence. Human Commander Elena Rodriguez of the vessel Persistence, the Vorthack Empire acknowledges your extraordinary service this day. You have prevented a catastrophe that would have consumed countless worlds. Luminara's mental voice carried undertones of deep thoughtfulness. Your species has accomplished what ours could not. You found a way to step outside the cycle of violence that has defined our existence for millennia. We are curious about how this changes things. Elena looked at the faces of both ancient enemies on her screen. These beings had been killing each other since before humanity had learned to use fire, locked in a conflict that had become so fundamental to their identities that they had forgotten how to exist without it. Now, suddenly, they were asking her what came next. I can't answer that question for you, she said honestly. My people have been caught in the middle of your war for barely a century. We've seen what it costs, the resources, the lives, the hope. But we've never understood what it was really about. She stood up, addressing both commanders as equals despite commanding the weakest ship in the system. But I can tell you what we learned today. Sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the best solution. Sometimes you need to go back to basics, use simple tools and clear thinking. And sometimes, she paused, meeting their alien gazes directly, the best way to win a war is to remember why you wanted peace in the first place. Both alien commanders remained silent for a long moment. Then Luminara spoke, her mental voice softer than before. We had forgotten that there could be alternatives to victory or defeat. Zex Thul's harmonic tones carried what might have been wonder. Your primitive vessels succeeded where our greatest technologies failed. Perhaps there is wisdom in simplicity. The three fleets remained in formation around the dead system for several hours, as if no one wanted to be the first to leave and break the spell of this unprecedented moment. Eventually, formal contact protocols were established, and for the first time in 800,000 years, the words ceasefire and negotiation were transmitted between Vorthack and Zalani vessels. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, Commander Elena Rodriguez stood in what had once been the Terran Defense Force's war room and was now being converted into something unprecedented, a three-species diplomatic center. Through the large windows, she could see construction crews, human, Vorthack, and Zalani working side by side, building the first joint research facility in galactic history. The transformation hadn't been easy or immediate. 800,000 years of hatred don't disappear overnight, and there have been numerous incidents and setbacks. Hardliners on all sides had denounced the ceasefire as temporary weakness. Some Vorthack colonies had initially refused to acknowledge the treaty, while certain Zalani factions had withdrawn to distant dimensions rather than accept peace with their ancient enemies. But the simple fact remained, the war was over. Commander Rodriguez? A voice behind her spoke with the carefully modulated tones of a universal translator. She turned to see Ambassador Kethmore, a young Vorthak diplomat whose crystal carapace still showed the blue tinge of inexperience. Unlike the older generation of Vorthak who had been shaped entirely by warfare, Kethmore and others like him were learning to think in terms of cooperation rather than conquest. "The Joint Commission is ready for your final report," the ambassador continued. "They're particularly interested in your recommendations for the memorial." Elena nodded and followed Kethmore through corridors that bustled with activity. The base had become something of a pilgrimage site, drawing visitors from across the galaxy who wanted to see where the ancient war had ended. More importantly, it had become a symbol of what could be accomplished when different species worked together. The commission chamber was a marvel of cooperative engineering. The atmospheric zones were carefully balanced to accommodate all three species comfortably, with gravity fields, lighting, and air composition adjusted to precise specifications. Around the circular table sat representatives from the three major powers, along with delegates from dozens of minor species who had been caught up in the galactic conflict. High Sage Luminara materialized as Elena entered, her energy form shimmering with what had become familiar patterns of greeting. "Commander, your presence completes our gathering. We are eager to hear your thoughts on how best to commemorate the events that brought us to this point." Elena took her place at the table, looking around at faces and forms that would have been unthinkable allies just months ago. The irony wasn't lost on her that she, the commander of one of the weakest ships in the human fleet, was now being consulted on matters of galactic significance. "The memorial should tell the truth," she began simply. "Not just about the battle, but about why it was necessary. For 800,000 years, our species fought because we forgot that we were fighting for something, not just against each other. We turned war into an end in itself rather than a means to an end." She gestured toward the window, where the mixed construction crews continued their work. "The real memorial isn't going to be a monument or a plaque. It's going to be what we build together going forward. The research station, the trade agreements, the joint exploration missions, that's how we honor the people who died in this war." Ambassador Kethmore's harmonic voice carried undertones of agreement. "The Vorthak Collective has decided to decommission our Devastator-class vessels. The resources will be redirected toward the terraforming projects we've discussed." "The Zalani Council of Sages concurs," Luminara added. "Our reality-shaping capabilities will be devoted to healing the worlds damaged during the conflict. We have calculated that it will take approximately 3,000 years to repair all the systems that were destroyed." Elena smiled at that. 3,000 years had once seemed like an impossibly long time to her species. Now, in the context of an 800,000-year war, it felt like the blink of an eye. "There's one more thing," she said, reaching into her uniform pocket and withdrawing a small metal plaque. "This was installed on the Persistence the day after the battle. I think it should be part of any official memorial." She placed the plaque on the table where everyone could see it. The inscription was simple, engraved in the three primary galactic languages. "The TDF Persistence and her crew, proof that sometimes the weakest ship carries the strongest hearts." The chamber fell silent as the representatives contemplated the humble plaque. Finally, Luminara spoke for all of them: "It shall be the first item installed in the memorial hall." As the meeting concluded and the delegates began to file out, Elena remained behind for a moment, looking once again through the window at the construction crews working together under the alien stars. The Persistence sat in a place of honor in the nearby shipyard, permanently retired but maintained as a symbol of what could be accomplished with determination, simple thinking, and a refusal to give up. The 800,000-year war was over. The age of cooperation was just beginning. And somewhere in the void, the universe itself seemed to breathe a little easier.